Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our first Taste of the Art program for the spring semester. My name is Stacy Brennan. I'm the Curator of Education for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. We're a museum located on Lehigh's campus. It's my great pleasure to kick off this event and to have the honor of introducing our guest speakers this evening. We're joined today by Veronica Moore, whose husband can't join us this evening, Quartez, but is with us in spirit. And Veronica and Q are the owners of Taste Smokers, which is a new restaurant in South Bethlehem. And our partner in crime here this evening is Maite Gomez-Rejon, the founder of Art Bites. This program is brought to you this evening in support from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the American Rescue Plan grant. Taste of Art is a free public program that combines mini art history lessons with live cooking demonstrations, and the program spotlights local Southside restaurants to support these businesses and encourage positive relations between Lehigh and its neighbors. Each workshop pairs a work of art from our collection and a related recipe from a featured restaurant to highlight the diverse cultures and voices that make up Bethlehem's Southside community. Free kits are available for pickup at the art gallery if you haven't gotten yours yet, or from the Taste Smokers. So you're welcome to do that after the program if you haven't picked it up yet. And I should mention that it includes a signature ingredient. In this case, a free sample of the Taste Smokers House Rub, which has not yet been released and will be for sale soon. So you get, a preview of that. So make sure you pick that up. And as part of this grant-funded program, participants are eligible to win gift certificates to the restaurant. So please make sure you tag us and like us and all that good stuff on social media and when you try out the recipes. A few logistics that I wanted to mention before we begin. Please be aware that we are recording this presentation. We're going to include it on the video section of our website. We ask that you keep your audio muted during the presentation, but you're welcome to unmute if you have any questions, or you're welcome to use the chat box for questions for the presenters. And at about 7:55 or so, we will begin our Q&A for the program. So Lehigh University, as I mentioned, has this amazing collection of over 18,000 works of art from diverse time periods and cultures. We showcase those works through 7 galleries across 3 campuses, and we do that in support of our mission, which is to advance critical thinking, cultural understanding, and well-being for campus and community through transformative experiences with art. No better way to do that than with food and art combined this evening in Taste of Art. We also have 2 study centers, a reading room, over 50 outdoor sculptures, as well as an exhibition on the South Bethlehem Greenway that I hope that you'll check out now that the weather is somewhat nice or getting nicer. And we have a great website with lots of resources at www.luag.org, or as we call ourselves, LUAG. So this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Veronica Moore, who is the co-owner of the Taste Smokers, and just opened a brick and mortar space in South Bethlehem. They've been with us for a few years in the area with a food truck and have been at many of our events and festivals in the area. And now we're lucky to have them call the South Side home. And I know Veronica also lives in Bethlehem, which is really wonderful. So I wanted to kick it over to Veronica to just give us a little background about her and Q, how they came to Bethlehem, how they got their business started, and kind of the idea of the featured recipes that we'll be exploring this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Veronica.
Thank you. So I appreciate that introduction, and thank you everybody who joined in tonight. I definitely want to thank you for your time and your attentiveness. I apologize that my husband is not here with us this evening. We had a small flood in our restaurant yesterday, and that was supposed to be our smoke day, but we had to deal with that, and now today is our smoke day. So he is out on the pit smoking pork shoulders for our sales for this weekend. And this is Hunter here as well with me. Do you want to come on the camera since you're standing here? Okay. But we are parents of two beautiful children. I came to the Lehigh Valley in 2007, and that's because I had a job at Lehigh University. So I had an internship in 2006, was employed by the Dean of Students Office in 2007, and stayed at Lehigh until 2013. So my background is in higher education, and I have an affinity for Lehigh. It was the first professional job that I had out of grad school. So that's a wonderful connection here. But fast forward to how the Tastesmokers came to be. My husband had background in sales and customer service, and just transparently one day was like, I can no longer be in a toxic work environment. And I've wanted to create something for our family for a long time. So in 2018, in July, he said, I need you to trust me. I need you to know that I will never put our family in a compromised situation, but I want to go ahead and open this food truck. So we did that. And we started to research and get everything that we needed in July of 2018. In October of 2018, we officially launched with our soft opening, and we were in the back of a parking lot on Water Street in Hellertown. So it was, you think about street food, which we're used to in Chicago, just with our own love and affection going into everything that we had to, put forth from our vision. That's how we got started. And then one day we had a friend to come who knew of a brewery owner who was a friend of his, and he said they're always looking for food vendors. So we had our first official pop-up in November of 2018 at Hop Hill Brewery, which coincidentally, they are now a partner with us in the establishment. We have their beer on tap. So it's a good kind of favor, right back around. So we were there first at their establishment, popping up, and then they're now in our brick and mortar, and we are appreciative of that relationship. So we'll feature other breweries in the area. It's not an exclusive partnership. We are community advocates, we are community supporters, and we believe in small businesses. So we try to make it our business to support other small businesses in the area also. So that's kind of how we got started in 2018. Fast forward to 2019, we had a remarkable year. We were ready to get started in 2020, and then COVID happened. And that rocked our worlds, rocked everybody's world, but definitely for those of us who are in the food and beverage industry, it kind of tested the waters, right, of whether or not we will be able to survive. But we are very grateful for our loyal customers, and even those who knew about us coming along because they found out we were doing a pop-up at one of the breweries for a pre-sale event. That is how we were able to sustain a little bit of the pandemic before some of the restrictions were lifted and some of the restrictions were allowed for us to actually serve. And then in 2021, we were approached by the CACLV about a commercial subsidy program that they were launching, and it wanted to provide opportunities for businesses to go ahead and establish themselves in the South Side district and also on the North Side of Bethlehem. And so we're very adamant about the fact that if we were going to do this, which I was like, do you not remember our 2020 and you want us to open a restaurant? But again, I went out on faith and trusted my husband again. And, it was something that we had the support of many different folks in the community to do. So we knew that we wanted to be on the South Side. When I first moved to the Lehigh Valley, I lived on the South Side. I could see them building. Wind Creek is what it's called now, but it was the Sands at the time. And so we knew that that's where the culture was, right? We knew that that's where a lot of the diverse populations resided on the South Side of Bethlehem, and we wanted to be immersed within that community. And so we knew that if we were going to find a place, we actually said, this is the building, this is the space that we wanted to be in, long before we even knew it was available. So when we think about divine intervention and, making sure that we were where we needed to be at the right time with the right opportunity, that is where you see the Tastesmokers at 318 East 3rd Street, South Bethlehem Arts District. So that's a little bit of a spiel about us.
Thanks, Veronica. And the best part is you're within walking distance from the art galleries, which is probably a blessing and a curse, because when I ate your food the other night, I needed a I was in like a food coma because it was so good. So that it's hard to do that during the workday, but I will make sure to do that with my colleagues. But yeah, we are so happy to have you on the South Side, and so thankful that you're here with us this evening. And so I wanted to transition a little bit to Maite, who I think is going to start us off with a little celebratory drink to honor the fact that you have newly opened this business and you are with us on the South Side.
Yes, thank you so much, Stacy, and everybody here, and Veronica for sharing your story. I was drooling looking at your website, at the images of your website. I love barbecue. I'm from Texas, so it's a different kind of barbecue. But yes, just to toast your new space and to go to Chicago. So I wanted to share a little history. So there are very few cocktails that actually are from Chicago. I see somebody with Lauren with a cocktail. The old-fashioned cocktail was first written about in a newspaper in Chicago. But then there's this one that we're making today that's called the Chicago cocktail. It first appeared in print in Chicago in the 19th century. And it's also called a fancy brandy cocktail. So I love the name fancy brandy cocktail. So in order to just, I don't know, we're here, we're together, let's make this fancy brandy cocktail, which has, it has brandy, which in the 19th century, this brandy, all cocktails were either made with brandy, with gin, or with whiskey. That's it. So this one has brandy. So I'm gonna add 2 ounces of brandy to this glass, followed by 1 ounce of triple sec. A lot of triple sec in these 19th century recipes as well. And if there wasn't any triple sec, there was some sort of like muddled lemon. And last but not least, 1 ounce of sparkling wine. So some recipes have the sparkling wine, some recipes don't have the sparkling wine, but I love some festive bubbles. I probably should have opened this before, but it's interesting that I've assumed, okay, it's called a fancy brandy cocktail because of the bubbles, but it's not actually called fancy because of this. This is not what makes it fancy. What makes it fancy is that it has some lemon zest in it. That's what makes it fancy. So if you, in the 19th century, if you went to a bar in Chicago and ordered a fancy cocktail, a brandy cocktail, you would get this, but without the lemon. You would get the lemon if you asked for it fancy, which is so funny, I think. I don't know, I think that's really interesting. But also, I mean, it wasn't that easy to get fresh lemons, especially in Chicago with the weather. So I'm adding 1 ounce of our celebratory sparkling wine. Give it a little mix. And then I'm just going to peel little orange peel. I'm sorry, not orange, little lemon zest. And just put it over here. And cheers, Veronica and everybody, the taste smokers. Yay. Let me see, let's taste this. Oh, that's really good. That's kind of strong. I'll wait till after the session to finish it. But cheers, everybody. Let's see, Kim, you made it before and you're doing it excellent. I'll enjoy it afterwards, but yes, it's very nice. So I'll transition over to you, Stacy, to tell us about the amazing exhibition. I wish I was there to see it in person before we start cooking.
Yeah, we wish you were here too. And I wish I had that cocktail in my hand right now. That is perfect for winter too, I think. So I'm gonna reshare my screen again, just so I can show you some images. So we are so fortunate to be the 4th venue for the traveling exhibition Young Gifted in Black, the Lumpkin Bacuzzi family collection of contemporary art. And in 1970, the celebrated singer and activist Nina Simone and the poet Weldon Irvin released the song To Be Young Gifted in Black, which became an anthem commemorating the achievements of the African-American community during the Black Power movement. Nearly 50 years later, this exhibition drawn from the Lumpkin-Bacuzzi family collection of contemporary art, celebrates Simone's prideful call to action. Young, Gifted, and Black, with over 40 contemporary artworks, and this is a view of the galleries here. The contemporary artworks made in the last 35 years arrives at a moment of unprecedented visibility for Black artists who have been historically underrepresented in museums and major collections. Younger generation voices in dialogue with established predecessors explore questions of race, sexuality, power, and history, while also pushing the boundaries of artistic practice. Some of the works on view address the daily real-world struggles of African Americans, while others focus on more personal and more universal questions of identity. We hope that this exhibition will inspire individuals in their own investigation into the same questions these young and gifted artists are asking, and create a sustained dialogue that can foster social change. This exhibition was supported in part by the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity and the Africana Studies program at Lehigh University, and it was curated by Antoine Sargent and Matt Wyckoff. And is currently Black Excellence Month here at Lehigh University. So it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate both the opening of Tastemokers and this exhibition. And so I wanted to start with our first artist, who is Chiffon Thomas. We just recently had a wonderful conversation called Art in Dialogue with Chiffon Thomas and Jenny Nwara, who is a curator and writer from Gallery 400 in Chicago. And Chiffon really explored her work and personal issues in that dialogue. And it was just amazing to learn more about her work, their work. And then this weekend, we had a family workshop where individuals created their own inspired embroidery from looking at Chiffon's work. Chiffon was born in Chicago, Illinois, which is the reason why we're here looking at their work today. We're going to feature some of the artists from this exhibition that were born or currently reside in Chicago. And Chiffon holds an MFA from Yale University and a BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Thomas has developed a multifaceted practice incorporating embroidery, collage, drawing, and now sculpture. To really explore the self as split, fractured, and transforming. Chiffon Thomas identifies as a non-binary queer person of color, and Thomas contends with the crafted body of their work, examining wider issues of gender, race, and sexuality. A lot of Thomas's work is inspired by photographs from their family, interior scenes of Black social and domestic life, the idea of a fleeting memory and finding ways to keep those fragmented and loose memories and relive those moments of youth. In this particular piece, and one of the things that I think is challenging about showing works virtually is that you can't get a sense of the scale, which is why I wanted to show you kind of some of the scale of the works in the exhibition, because some are much larger than you can view them on the screen. But in this piece, a mother who had no mother, the central figure is seated on a colorful pink chair, and the fabric breaks the picture's plane, hanging below the frame as if she were about to rise from the past to enter our world. Thomas based this work on an old photograph of Thomas and her mother, but the artist has chosen to omit themselves to focus really the viewer's attention on the strength of their mother. And this monumental symbol of maternity, which is so fitting considering we have Veronica here juggling 2 kids at the same time of being a small business owner, among the many other things that she is working on. But Thomas asks, how do you learn how to be something if you never had an example? How do you learn how to be nurturing? Thomas would use their story to remind us to be appreciative of their own mother and how you cannot be the type of person that you are without that type of guidance. So we can see really this intertwined idea of family history and these interior kind of intimate moments. We're lucky to have 2 pieces by Chiffon Thomas in our exhibition. The second is called A New Dad. And this really explores the idea of reconciling identity and the powerful ideas of family shaped by childhood, as I said, and kind of this idea of holding on to those memories and reliving them throughout their lives. Caitlyn Sherry is another artist who was born in Chicago in 1987. She now lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, and in a practice that combines painting, sculpture, installation, and with a reference to history and present day politics. Caitlyn Sherry really connects diverse categories and methods. So she's really interested in how the Black female body can be represented in new ways to incorporate elements of science fiction, which we can see kind of here, and broken technology, especially given the world that we are in right now. And ironically, as the world is increasingly reliant on screens, as we are tonight, the medium of painting really threatens that and kind of tries to convene us into the painting of the medium of painting and to celebrate that. And this particular piece, Ghost Labyrinthian, draws its title from a large and aggressive sea creature in the video game Subnautica, which I'm not quite familiar with, but I need to look up, and allows the player to explore an alien ocean. She's really acknowledging the identity, that identity is shaped by a confluence of sources. And a critic notes that in Sherry's figures, it's equal part by society and technology and their own selves. So she's really representing almost these three-dimensional worlds that we're living in. Rasheed Johnson is another artist that was born in Chicago, Illinois. And he employs a wide range of media to explore themes of art history, individual and shared cultural identities, personal narratives, literature, philosophy, materiality, and critical history in his work. After studying photography at the Art Institute of Chicago, his practice quickly expanded to a wide range of media, including sculpture, painting, drawing, filmmaking, and installation, and really yielding a multidisciplinary and complex practice that incorporates diverse materials with symbolism and personal history. In this particular work, he's really looking at elements of childhood experience, religion, and culture. He says that I've never been able to separate those issues and look at them apart from myself. Race, class, childhood experience, the books I found on my mother's bookshelf, the albums I found in my father's basement, these things are all part of who I am and will always be a part of my work. The Kiss, this piece that we see here, is part of a series of double exposure portraits of polished-looking African-American men called the New Negro Escapist Social and Athletic Club. Here, the conventional masculinity of the image is playful, undercut by the kiss of the double exposure. Johnson does not feel compelled to explain why he does what he does, and he wants to leave us more with questions than answers. In this piece, which is, I wish you could see the scale of it that's in the gallery, Christina Quarles, who was born in Chicago and is now living in Los Angeles, paints bodies that are subjected not only to the weight and gravity of the physical world, but also to the pleasures and pressures of the social realm. Her ambiguous and evocative scenes feature figures whose limbs, torsos, and faces collide and merge with familiar domestic objects, made strange through her color choices and experimental painterly gestures. Her work explores the universal experience of existing within a body, as well as the other ways race, gender, and sexuality intersect to form complex identities. Carrie James Marshall, who's kind of one of the leading older generation artists that is in this exhibition, was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but moved to Chicago and taught at the University of Illinois, Chicago for many years. And he was really interested in the idea of depicting everyday African Americans in everyday settings, but then kind of also explored ways of creating kind of these these images of famous African-American people and presenting them in new ways and challenging the Western canon of art history, and was really interested in this idea of comics and the way that that's presented. So in this particular work, we see that he is looking at kind of white suburban culture and looking at this den mother as stands tall and black and proud, her uniform stretched tight like armor and her supersized fists ready to strike. Around her head, we see the traditional kind of European halo, which we have seen in some of the different paintings throughout art history, is created with this jagged, almost comic-like look, giving strength and power to this subject, which is really beautiful. He is recontextualizing the canon of Western history and is leading the next generation of artists in their own identity and exploration of materials. And our last artist that we'll look at, it was not from Chicago, but was from Springfield, Illinois, the capital of Illinois. And Hemmons moved to Los Angeles later to study art, but he once commented, a quote from him was that he loved outrageously magical, he said, outrageously magical things happen when you mess around with a symbol. So we see here the symbol of the American flag. And for the past 50 years, he's created a vocabulary of symbols from everyday life and messed around with them in the form of prints, drawings, performances, video, found object sculptures, and paintings. He is kind of an outsider in the contemporary art world and really loves to play with our sense of symbolism. And in this iconic African-American flag series that he presented, it's his most significant work. He completed it in a full scale and miniature sizes. And it really represents the idea of a new flag for a new nation and a new kind of future. The first flag that he created was shown in 1990 for the landmark exhibition Black USA at the Museum over Holland in Amsterdam, which was a significant menu because it recognized the lack of exposure of African-American artists in Europe at that time. And the original work indicated a moment of political optimism, coinciding with Nelson Mandela's release from Robben Island and the election of David Dinkins as the first Black mayor of New York City. So this is a wonderful piece to end here with. We have so many works in this collection that I wish that I could show you here tonight, but we're celebrating the kind of cuisine and excitement of Chicago. So I hope that you'll come to the exhibition to see it for yourself. And with this piece and David Hemmons, I'm gonna turn it over to Maite, and she's gonna take us through some cooking and tell us a little bit about our featured recipes this evening.
Thank you so much, Stacey. That's amazing. I wish I was there. I wish I could see that exhibition. It's just unbelievable. But that David Hemmons piece really resonates. I mean, there's just that image, you know, because we know the flag, the red, white, and blue, and then all of a sudden, if we see it in green and red and black, it's really, really striking. And it's amazing just how powerful a symbol is. So he made that, like you said, at this moment, in 1990, the original flag was made to sort of show how artists weren't, you know, African-American artists weren't really shown in museums. And on that, and there are so many wonderful contemporary artists that are following their footsteps of people like David Hemmons and Kerry James Marshall and so many others that came before. But the same thing is happening in food right now. There's so many people that are writing about food, and there's so much interest in farming and what happened. I mean, we know what happened in the South, and it was nothing, you know, to be proud of, but it's like, where are these stories and who's telling these stories? And with that flag, there's this wonderful food historian that's based in Virginia. He's from DC, based in Virginia, Michael Twitty. And he wrote, African-American food is American food. So that ties in so well to that flag. I mean, it is, whether you grew up in, I don't know, Chicago or a small town in Oregon or wherever, we've all had macaroni and cheese. We've all had fried chicken. Like, that is American food, but that goes to the South, and that has, you know, such a rich, deep story. And there are so many chefs, historians, farmers. I mean, there's only about 2% of African-American farmers in the US, but there's this renewed interest in the land in the South and what happened, the rice, just everything, and all of these stories. And Michael Twitty, he has this really great quote that I wanted to share, other than the African-American food is American food. And this is just so powerful. He says, this food, and he was talking specifically about collard greens, which is a recipe that Veronica will lead me through, but he specifically was talking about collard greens, but relates to everything. Oh, this is a fan favorite. So he said, this food connects us to the globe. It connects us to Africa. It connects us to slavery, to freedom, to sharecropping, to migration, to triumph, to survival. It's a powerful symbol of our history, our social identity, and the cultural politics we negotiate our lives by. So powerful and just amazing. So I love what he's doing. So there's him, there's a woman, another food historian, Dr. Jessica Harris, who wrote a book called High on the Hog. And she's been researching African-American foodways forever. She's one of the old guard. Michael Twitty is the newer guard. And her book, High on the Hog, was made into a Netflix series. It's a 4-part series, and it's really wonderful. It starts in Africa. He's in different parts of it. Stephen Satterfield is the host, which is also a new face for a host for a food show. It's usually white men, for a few exceptions, but it's usually white men. And here's this guy who was a sommelier, and he starts in Africa and works his way to the South, and interviews a bunch of people along the way. So there's this incredible sort of interest in these stories, right? And in sharing these stories. And it's not, you know, the Paula Deans of the Food Network, who's from the South and appropriating these foods, but it's the African-American chefs that are telling these stories, and that are basically just a part of them. But all of this started, you know, in the South. But I wanted to share a little bit of just connecting a little bit to the artist again, this time of the Great Migration that started in 1915. So from 1915 to 1970, there was this migration of African Americans that went from the rural South, so right around the First World War, to the Northeast, to the Midwest, and to the West Coast. But the main cities were New York and Chicago. So it was around 1915. The people started to leave. Railroads were being built, so it was easier to leave the South for opportunities. And so between 1915 and 1920, there was that first wave. So in total, over 6 million African Americans sort of moved from the South. But in 1915, about 50,000 African Americans settled in Chicago. So I'm not going to talk about New York tonight. They settled in Chicago, but there was already a pretty substantial African American community in Chicago starting in the mid-19th century. So even before the end of the Civil War, free African Americans were living there, and also, you know, fugitives from the Underground Railroad. So there was a community, and actually the very first church was built in 1891, and it's still standing, and they fed people. Whoever came, they fed. These churches fed people. But there's a newspaper, the Chicago Defender, that went virtual in 2019. Well, it's only online now, but it's this first African-American newspaper that started in 1905. It's still around. And actually, I was on it a few days ago, and this is Chicago Restaurant Week, which is an aside, but I thought that was sort of interesting. They were widely read. That newspaper was widely read in the South. So they were announcing, advertising, meatpacking, jobs in the meatpacking industry and other jobs. So meat, barbecue. So people started moving, to Chicago. So in 1923, there's a directory in the Chicago Defender that talks about that lists the African American owned businesses. So this is 1923, 120 grocery stores, Black owned, 120 grocery stores, 100 restaurants, 13 bakeries, 28 ice cream and candy shops. That's so many ice cream and candy shops, and 18 stores specializing in soft drinks, right? So all of this, but 120 grocery stores and 100 restaurants. I mean, that's a lot of restaurants. And this is, people coming from the South. So we started seeing things like collard greens and macaroni and cheese and brisket, all of these foods that we consider, associate with, the South. They start making their way to Chicago, and they also start making their way to New York with the Harlem Renaissance. It coincides with the Harlem Renaissance. But there's Louis Armstrong was one of the many people that made this migration. And he has an autobiography in 1923, same time that we see this list, this directory. He wrote about just going from New Orleans to Chicago, and the importance of planning meals in advance of the trip. Because even though they could go on the trips, they weren't allowed in the dining carts. So he says, when I got on that train, I found an empty seat next to a lady and her 3 children. And she was really sticking. What I mean by sticking is that she had a big basket of good old Southern fried chicken, which she had fixed for the trip. She had enough to last her and her kids, not only to Chicago, but clear out to California if she wanted to go that far. There was no place for colored people to eat on the trains in those days. Colored persons going north crammed their baskets full of everything but the kitchen stove. So this whole idea of, I love that he says, okay, she had enough fried chicken to get to Chicago or all the way to California if she wanted it to. This whole idea of, okay, you have a little bit and you make a lot. You kind of make do with what you have and you share. So this was part of the community. In the church that I mentioned before, it's called the Quinn Chapel. That's still around today. Sort of going to churches, feeding the community. If you you couldn't make rent, you throw a rent party. Not ask for money, but throw a party, cook a really good meal, have somebody play, sing or whatever, play music, whatever it was, to entertain, and then pitch into rent. So it became this very, very tight-knit community, early on. And then there was, again, this second wave that happened in 1945 and post-World War II, and that was about 750,000 African Americans moved to Chicago at that point. So we start seeing more and more and more of these restaurants offering these foods that were that were called, down home foods that we now call soul food. So the term soul food wasn't coined until the 1960s, around the civil rights, era. We hear about soul music and soul brother and soul sister, but then that's when we start seeing it as soul food, which is such a beautiful term. It's the only type of cuisine that is named after an abstract. Right? It's like the soul. It's not, Mexican food or whatever food, it's the soul food. And it's this food that connects African Americans to the deceased ancestors, the soon to be born, children. It's this great, great connector. And I love that. I love that idea of just like the soul, which is just so powerful. And I could go on for 3 more hours, but I just realized the time. So we're going to make the collard greens, which I was shocked to find out that collard greens are actually native to Europe, but became the sort of collard greens, they were brought to the South in the 17th century with colonization. I'm going to slice 1 onion. It's a tiny onion, so if you're making this at home later, you could use a larger onion. This is like a puny little onion. And then made into, Africans we're used to eating lots of greens. I mean, it's good weather, right? It's hot, it's sunny, lots and lots of greens, and then just making what they knew how, to make it at home. So I'm actually gonna just dice and adding a little bit of, Veronica, let me know, should I dice it or should I just mince it? Should I just cube it? What should I
go ahead and dice it.
And dice it, okay. So kind of making it, and the enslaved people weren't getting the choice, cuts of meat. So they were adding whatever they could get. So we hear now the term the nose to tail has become such a trendy thing. It was the only way. It was the only way. Like, it was used to use every part of the animal. And so what I'm doing now, I know that Veronica, you guys use chicken smoked turkey.
We use smoked turkey, and that's just by health reasons. There's a lot of people who don't eat pork, right? And so I love pork. I love a good ham hock in my greens, but my husband can't have a lot of pork. And so I just choose to use smoked turkey. My favorite to use, that I use frequently, is smoked turkey thighs. But I also love smoked turkey tails, are really good because of the fat content in it. It really just provides a lot of flavor and tenderness to the meats. But funny story, growing up, my mother grew up in the South. So there were things that she just, like, when you talk about eating every part of the animal, raccoon, possum, my mother, that's what they grew up eating. But there were certain foods that my mother would not eat. And so she thinks that turkey tails are disgusting. And I'm like, turkey tails are good. So we didn't use turkey tails growing up. So I'm like, when I found out about turkey tails, like, early in my, young adulthood, I was like, what is this? I mean, what have I been missing all my life? But it's just a different flavor. So I can equate turkey tails to the same texture as the ham hocks, but that's what we use.
Okay, I love that idea, because that's how I felt. I was at the grocery store, because I was like, where do you get this? And Veronica's like, just at your local grocery store. I was like, okay, so I went. There's a huge section that's just this smoked, everything. And that's how I felt. Like, where have you been all my life?
I love
I couldn't find any turkey. They had turkey pieces, but everything was just too big. They didn't have any tails. But now I didn't see any tails, because you did mention.
That tails are a little more difficult to come by. You have to be in a pretty urban area to get it. But I chuckled at your text message. Said, should I go to my local barbecue place and get some smoked turkey? I was like, girl, go to the grocery store.
She's like, what are you talking about? That was so funny.
I love it.
And I did. And I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. There's so much of it.
Now you know.
Yeah, there's so many, now I know. But that's how like you said, where have you been all my life with the turkey tail? I was like, where have you been all my life?
No.
I got a ham hock, which is basically it's enormous, which is a knuckle, and it feels kind of meaty. It's a lot of tendons, right? And this, I can imagine, this is what's going to give a ton of amazing flavor to our. So I just diced that 1 mini onion and 3 cloves of garlic. I'm going to use I have 2 bunches of collard greens. So I'm just going to saute this. Should I just saute both of these together? I just put about 2 tablespoons of oil in here.
Yeah, that should be good. Saute your onions, your garlic, and do you have fresh thyme?
I do.
Just put the sprig in there, and then we'll take it out.
Okay. So I'm just going to put this in here. What should I put it on, medium high, or what do you think?
Medium is fine.
Medium, okay.
Yeah.
So I have it on medium.
You don't want it to burn too quickly.
Okay. So I have my garlic and the onion in here. And how much time should I
You want to get the onions translucent.
Okay, before we put the ham hock in there?
No, you can put the thyme in. You can put all of those ingredients. So the onions, the garlic, the thyme, and the ham hock. in the pot together, and cook it down until the onions get translucent.
Okay. Is this too much?
Yeah, that's too much. Just get a couple sprigs.
Okay.
Now, if you were making like a huge pot, yeah, that's perfect. Then I'll put that whole thing in there, but you're only making a little bit.
Yeah, I don't have a ton. Okay, so I'll put this in here. And this is one of those things, right? You make a little bit, you have a little bit and you make a ton, but this is just going to give it all of this incredible flavor and also protein and fat, right? It just, you know, all of the, everything we need. This, I'm shocked that my dog is in here right now. I think my husband just went to walk it, but I almost tripped over her a million times when I opened this. She's like, what am I smelling? So this is already cooked, right? It's smoked. It's just a smoked.
Yep, smoked meat.
Smoked hot, yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just sauteing this with the. Let me just show everybody what this looks like. And sorry, let me just flip this over to show. And this is such a staple, right? With barbecue, right? Like this whole. And let me just flip this over so that I could show what it looks like. This beautiful. Should I move this around or just leave it like this?
Put a little more oil in the pan.
A little more oil.
Veronica, I watched a video, an interview with you and Q, and you said that you start with the same kind of house rub, but then with each of your meats, you kind of adapt for the different meats, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so we use that house rub on, it's a base for everything. And then we have a rib rub, we have a salmon cure, and you know, with our jerk, we do a little bit of, we also have a brisket rub too. That's just a little more simple. But then the jerk, we use a dry and a wet.
Delicious. So I'm gonna I have, it looks like the onions are pretty translucent. Should I add my collards?
You're gonna add your water first.
My water first, okay.
Add your water to make it about half of that pot and then bring it to a boil.
Okay, so let me do that. I'm just gonna come over here to the sink real quick. And I'll be right back. I'm just gonna, okay, so I'm just gonna cover this while I wait for this to come to a boil. So there's no salt or anything right now. It's just the halfway water, the onion, the garlic, and the thyme. And then we have all of these collards, which again, I was shocked. There's this incredible woman who's working she's in South Carolina, Gabrielle E. Carter. And she's doing all sorts of, I'm just taking the stems off of these collards before, you know, just to unite them with the others. And she's doing a lot with the farming community in South Carolina. And she was very upset when I read this article, this interview. She was very upset when she found out that collard greens are not native to Africa. She said it kind of shocked her systems. Like, how is this European? This is part of my DNA. Like, how is this? It's so interesting how food, you know, does that. Like, wait, what is this? And there's this other woman, and I'll share this book also. I'll send a bibliography for Stacy to share, but Black Food, this great book. And there are tons of amazing recipes by artists and food historians. There's these great articles, essays, but there's this woman, Adrienne Lipscomb, and she's from Texas. She's in South Carolina, but was native to Texas and was in Wisconsin. She's starting this initiative called 40 Acres and a Mule. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but she's buying land in South Carolina. She has this GoFundMe buying land in South Carolina for Black farmers to grow their food. And it's a whole program to educate the community on Black foodways. And it's so interesting. There's so many, there's the old guard and there's the new guard, and there's lots of artists that are involved in this and are doing really interesting things. She has her great grandmother's recipe for collards. And I love how she describes the actual, the greens. How are we doing, Stacey? I know we're gonna go over time a little bit.
That's okay. I think we had it till 8:15. So if people are okay with sticking with us, then.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, perfect. So this is interesting, and then I want to hear your stories about your collards and the barbecue and all of this. But she says, my great grandmother James's hands were in everything, from putting seeds in the soil to bringing the plates to the table. When it came to collard greens, she would say, "Triple wash your greens, then read the greens. The greens will tell you everything you need to know about how the world is doing. Look at the sand and dirt from the greens. It could tell you how farmers cared for them. The damage and insects found in collards tell you about the health of the farm and the soil and how often they were tended to. The color and hardiness of the collards informs you how the greens were cared for." So I love the whole idea of read your greens, look at Veronica, you're so involved in, you were saying before, like, you love plants, like this whole idea of read your plant will tell you everything. And I love just how the collard green, I was actually surprised also that I thought that collards were African. The plant itself was native to Africa, and I was actually surprised. But it's like, oh, it's so fascinating to me how a collard green can tell a whole story. Just with any ingredient, it could tell an entire story. It's so fascinating. I love this idea. So when you tell us about your greens and about, just Chicago, this whole, barbecue is something that's been, I said before, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in South Texas, which is more barbacoa, right? Which is more like beef cheeks and eating with tortillas. It's very, very, very different. But the Chicago, when I was reading this whole idea of the, during the Great Migration, that African Americans sort of lured, I guess, to Chicago, this meatpacking, industry.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pork there. Chicago more pork, and then Texas is more beef. Like, can you talk a little bit about that while we wait for our water to boil?
Yeah, so growing up, it was called the Meatpacking District, right? And so there is a certain part of Chicago that's right off of the South Loop, where there were meat factories, right? That's where people came to find steady work. So when you think about the migration, it happened because people started to trickle from the South and come to Chicago because there was opportunity. And you saw families will send some folks up for a little bit, get them established, and then send for the rest of the family, right? Once they knew that they could find steady work. That's what happened with my mother. She's from Forest City, Arkansas, which is not too far from Memphis. It's in the Delta region of the South. And so, me growing up, it was just, you saw it all the time, right? We would go to the meatpacking district to get our huge slabs of bacon that we would have to cut ourselves, right? And it wasn't packaged pretty in the store, right? I didn't know that bacon came that way until I was a little bit older. I was used to going to get the full slab that was hanging on the rack. I would call it the coat hanger. Mommy, why is the pork bacon hanging on the coat hanger in the meatpacking district, right? Or why do we have to go in there? It's so cold all the time. But that was steady work, right? And so you did have a lot of pork there. You had a lot of manufacturers there. There's a lot of different cultures and neighborhoods in Chicago that, kind of melted together, right? You have Germantown, you have Polish Town, you have Jewtown, some of those derogatory names that I found out later. I'm like, Jewtown, that's not really nice to say, right? But that is how the city really determined who was from where, right? And so, but all of those individuals would go and work in the meatpacking districts. But you did find a lot of African Americans who would go to the meatpacking districts to find steady work. But the whole Chicago barbecue piece is the infusion or the fusion of those different types of barbecuing and smoking meats methods from the South, from the Tennessee, from the, the Memphis and the Arkansas and the Mississippi, and, certain parts of Texas as well, in terms of knowing the different techniques of how to start the fire. What are you using to cook the meat? Are you using wood? Are you using charcoal? Are you using a little bit of both? How long are you smoking the meat, right? And so for us, it just became a part of what we would do culturally with our families. Every single time that we would get together, there was something on the smoker. It was just innate within you. You knew how to do it. You know what's necessary. And you know what goes with what, right? Like if you didn't have a barbecue without greens, you just didn't, or without a pasta or spaghetti or something like that, a potato salad. And for us, it was, our family was from Memphis, our family was from Arkansas, we had family from the South. So we would learn how to do the different techniques of smoking meat that way. And that's how you found the other actually restaurants, right, like established in Chicago, who were opening up and having barbecue. They weren't from Chicago. They were coming up and they were, raised from the South, and they moved up to Chicago because, like you said, there were over 100 restaurants. That was an opportunity for them to thrive. But you have the slow smoke, right, of the brisket that's infused within how you do the ribs. You have the dry rub that's really based in Kansas City. That's really a part of the culture in Chicago as well. We do not do North Carolina barbecue in Chicago. That is not a thing, right? So there's very different way of preparing barbecue from North Carolina to what the Chicago kind of fusion way is. And there's no, I find this to be very matter of fact. Some people would argue with me. And it's also a part of that personal flair that I told you about also. It's not wet. It's dry rub. You do not barbecue with sauce. That is a sin, right? You cannot come into the Taste Smokers and ask us, what sauce do you put on your meat when it's done? Sauce is always optional, right? And so that's because we want to make sure that you taste the flavor of the meat. We don't want it disguised under a sauce. Now, there are some times where, I need a little bit of stickiness. I need a little sauce on my ribs, but even growing up, my mother would make a pot of sauce, and what she would do is she would mix a few of the different store-bought sauces. So we used to use open pit a lot. I don't even know if they make open pit barbecue sauce anymore, but she would add like a lemon to it, lemon juice, and put the lemon in and put the orange in and kind of like let it simmer all day. But you would mop that right after it's done and on your plate. You mop it on the plate, not on the smoker, not on the grill, right? And so it's just a really, really beautiful thing in terms of different techniques and methods of barbecue coming together and really providing that unique Chicago flair to things, and that's just a part of the Chicago melting pot culture in general.
That's so interesting, and it makes perfect sense because it's the only city, outside of, say, Tennessee, the Carolinas, East Texas.
Yeah.
But Chicago, it's far from that area.
Yeah.
Because you don't really see like New York style barbecue, or it's very specific. But it would make sense that it's a blend. And you mentioned those 100 restaurants. That was in 1923. Now it's like
exactly.
So many.
Yeah.
I want to check because this is boiling. I can hear it. It's a roaring boil.
You want to add your greens now?
Add all my greens.
Yep.
And how long am I cooking this?
Yours will probably be about an hour because you're doing a very small pot. But here's the thing about cooking, right, in a Black household. Many things you don't, at least how I was raised and how we were brought up, you don't know exact measurements, right? You're like, just throw it in the pot and taste it as you go, right? That's a part of how we learned how to cook. So it's a funny story where someone who used to work with us, it's like, what's the recipe for this? What's the recipe for that? And I'm like, recipe? I'll just cook it until it's done and it tastes good, right? That's a part of the soul piece. It's just like you're cooking it and you're putting your heart into it and you're tasting it along the way and you're figuring out what you need as you go along. But what I would always tell people is that for your small batch, and even the batch that we have in the recipe card, that's going to take about 2 hours. But I always tell people to taste the greens first, because it depends upon how people want their texture to be, right? I like my greens to be very tender, and melt in your mouth, right? And so, you know, some folks will be like, you're cooking all the nutrients out of it. And I'm like, well, I'm eating it for flavor, not for nutrients. So, you know, you want to taste the greens to see if you like a bit of a crunch to yours, then you want to make sure that you turn them off in less than an hour, right? If you want them to be super tender, then continue to just taste them. But I would say at least an hour, see how they feel and taste to you, to your liking. And then turn them off when, you know,
when
we're
it's
good to go. But you also, you want to add your other ingredients.
Yeah. So I have about 2.5 tablespoons of brown sugar.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Sure.
I thought it was based on the recipe that you sent, which was for larger.
Yeah.
But it's about this much.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
And am I on high heat still? Or do
You
I
can
wanna
go
lower
ahead
it?
and turn it down now after
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna add the brown sugar, and then I have about a tablespoon of seasoned salt.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm using Lori's brand, you know, seasoned salt.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar.
Yep.
Does that seem?
Yeah.
I guess I can just, you know, taste it as, you know, wait up in about half an hour, taste it.
Yeah. And so what the vinegar does, it takes the bitterness out of the greens. Although that's a bitter tasting liquid, right? It takes the bite out of it so that it's not as acidic and bitter. And so the sugar is going to bring some savoriness to it as well.
And so most of the liquid will evaporate, correct? It'll because it shouldn't be as soupy, right? It should be just, I should cook it until the most of the liquid is just.
You should have some juice in it. So you wanted to have a broth. Yeah, you wanted to have a broth. If you were working first with a saute, so let's just say that you had your onions and your garlic and your smoked meat, and you were going to saute the greens first and then add a little liquid, that's when you want it to be kind of less liquid in the pot, right? But for this is more of like a stewed recipe for the greens.
Okay. Okay, like but not like a soup. It's more stewy.
Yep.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ham hock is just for its flavor, or do I want to just like rip the meat out of it
when it gets tender? You want to make sure that you have a ham hock piece on every bite.
Okay.
That you
so
take.
Just cut it up, just open, just.
It should pull apart, right? When it gets tender, you should be able to pull it apart, or just like, you know, use your spoon to kind of grab it off of that bone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited. We actually ordered, I'm in LA, but we ordered barbecue. So we have a couple of friends coming over for dinner. They're picking up some barbecue. And so they're coming over in about an hour and a half. So this should be perfect by then.
Should be good. Yeah.
Should be good. So do I want to leave it uncovered?
No, cover the pot.
Okay. So let me just show everybody what it looks like before I cover it. And it's really, they're still bright green, because this will turn sort of grayish, right? The color.
Yeah, it would be a dark, really dark green. That looks good. You want to keep your heat right there, or
okay.
Keep it right there, and that's going to be good. Make sure you cover it and don't keep lifting the lid. You want to let it kind of cook and do its thing.
Okay, so I'm at medium, a little over medium, but
yeah, that looks good. And when you're done, you should have just a little bit less of that liquid in there.
Okay, like half?
Not even.
Okay, so just like maybe like an inch.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. I'm excited. It smells really good already. Already, it smells really good. So good. Gosh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm so excited. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I just saw, yeah. So I will share. Yeah. I will share. I have a whole bibliography. There's so many people doing so many interesting things, writing about so many interesting things. So I will share a bibliography if anybody wants to explore further, because there's a lot of interesting things going on. Anybody have any questions for Veronica, for myself, for Stacy before we? Thank you so much for sticking with us since we went over time a bit. Any questions?
We're actually right on time.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, well, I did say 7 to 8:15, so that's great. Did anyone have any questions? If not, what is the rub in the kit for? A specific meat? So
you want to use it for. So it's just it can be used on chicken. It can be used on pork. It can be used on beef. I wouldn't do it on a seafood. It's a little too rich for seafood, but any other. I mean, you can also use it on vegetables.
It smells amazing.
Yeah.
It's been in our reading room in the gallery, and the whole place smells delicious.
You all are the first ones, like the first general public to even have access to our rubs. And so we are releasing them next month. So you all should feel like VIPs, because no one else has been able to have a sample of our rubs. We kind of guard it.
We do feel like VIPs, especially because you were so generous with sharing your history, your family history, how this all came to be. It was such a wonderful way to kind of learn about your restaurant and your culture and your recipes. So we're so thankful to you. And Maite, thank you for such a rich conversation and for leading us through how to make the collard greens, which I plan to do this evening. And it sounds like Michael already did it this evening, cooked it on chicken, used your rub for roast chicken thighs, which sounds amazing too.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
I'm just going to do one last screen share. Oh, good. Glad to hear that, Michael. Thank you. One last thing I just want to mention, this coming Tuesday, we have a public reception and a free artist talk with 2 of the artists that are featured in Young, Gifted, and Black, and art historian and curator Denny Mara. Alterance Gumby is one of the artists, and Wilmer Wilson the 4th. So we hope you'll join us for that conversation, and then into the gallery for a reception. We have yoga for everybody. So if you're looking to kind of relax and de-stress, we have an amazing program with Shanti Project in the Lehigh University Art Gallery space. And then our next taste of art will be with Melanie Lino from Made by Lino and Lit Coffee Roastery, and also on 3rd Street in Bethlehem on March 31st. So we'll be exploring Dominican recipes and culture from Melanie's background. So we're really looking forward to that. So we hope you'll join us for all of this. All this information is on our website. We will follow up with the recording from today with a list of resources, and don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're always happy to answer questions, and just so thankful to Maite and Veronica for such a wonderful program this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This is very special to us, and so we really enjoy being able to share a little bit of who we are as a family and as a business on the South Side. Like we said, it means a lot for us to be on this side of town and to be able to give back to the community, because first and foremost, we are community advocates before we're restaurateurs. So thank you all so much for your help in kind of getting us out there and for people to learn a little bit more about the Tastesmokers.
Absolutely. And we're thankful to Gladius for being such a great participant. He was so quiet and amazing. Yeah, so cute.
He's going to turn up
the show a little bit. Well, thank you all again. And we look forward to seeing you soon and visiting your restaurant, Veronica. I know I will be a regular, that's for sure. Oh,
I need to plan a trip.
Yes, you do, Maite.
Thank you all so much. And Veronica, thank you for answering all of my frantic texts.
Text me. Please let me know how it turns out, and I would love to keep in contact with you.
Absolutely, I will. Right. Absolutely.
And if anyone hasn't picked up a kit yet, feel free to stop by. It'll also be available at the event on Tuesday and at Tastesmoker. So yeah, thanks again.
I think we have 3 or 4 left. So
I'll bring you some more. That's
okay. Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice
Bye.
evening. See you soon.
Thank you.